Abby, Patrick's put stacks and stacks and stacks of books in front of us. Do you want to give us a title? Hit me with the title.
Oh my God. Normally I would love having stacks and stacks and stacks of books in front of me, but I am not loving these. But okay, I'll start. The Narcissist's Playbook.
I don't know why that sounds like a cookbook. The Narcissism Epidemic, Living in the Age of Entitlement.
Becoming the Narcissist's Nightmare. How to devalue and discard the narcissist while supplying yourself.
Rethinking Narcissism, the bad and surprisingly good about feeling special.
I'll see that and raise you, exacting your revenge on a malignant and malicious narcissist.
Yours are so vindictive.
Reversing the mind control, gaslighting, manipulation, and more! Exclamation point.
I can't top it, but I think I would enjoy Everyday Narcissism. Yours, mine, and ours.
I was going to dial it back, but honestly, you're not crazy. It's your mother. That's my favorite so far.
All right. The Culture of Narcissism, American Life in an Age of Diminishing Expectations.
Well, that is actually a classic.
Yeah.
Yes, Christopher Lash. We'll talk about that. There's going to be at least a whole episode on that.
I had a guest lined up for that one.
How about how to torture a narcissist? Narcissistic revenge.
I love it.
Oh, wait. How about how to kill a narcissist? Debunking the myth of narcissism and recovering from narcissistic abuse.
Narcissists, they're vulnerable to bullets.
You made that up.
I made that one up. How about break up with narcissism? How to break free and stay free.
Sounds good to me. How about nice, simple, elegant narcissistic fathers?
I'm looking at these. Some of these just sound like good books, honestly. Children of the Self-Absorbed, A Grown-Up's Guide to Getting Over Narcissistic Parents.
How about, this one actually takes a twist in a way that I don't feel very comfortable with. Disarming the Narcissist, How to Stay Married to a Narcissistic Partner and Be, parentheses, reasonably, close parentheses, happy.
Wow. I don't like that. Yeah, the title of the book is already asking me to compromise in ways that I'm very uncomfortable with. I don't like that. Disarming the Narcissist, Surviving and Thriving with the Self-Absorbed. Did you already say that one?
No, it's Disarming the Narcissist is the one that I just read.
I'm trying to think of like the patterns that we're seeing here. There's a lot of like anger and violence when talking about narcissists, just in the cover, like the titles of these books.
And the subtitles, which is where a lot of the real anger lives. As in, for instance,
the subtitle is the footnote of the title.
Divorcing and Healing from a Narcissist, the highly sensitive person dodging energy vampires, handling narcissistic ex, emotionally destructive marriage, and overcoming anxiety in toxic relationships. The last name of that author is simply Good.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Just in case you wanted, I mean, I think part of what you're getting at though is like, these are self-help books for the most part, but also Star Wars, right? Like they're like Manichaean, like they're in the register of good and evil, and the scrappy underdog that is going to manage to extricate themselves from the thrall of the tractor beam. See how I brought Star Wars back into there? Of the narcissist. So like we get this idea that like the narcissist is this figure that is larger than life. And if you happen to stumble upon one of these creatures who are not so rare in, real life, well, you're fucked. Like game over. Although there is a vast literature of books that might help you extricate yourself from that situation.
From the being fucked.
Yeah.
I don't know. In my head, I think it would be difficult to find another subcategory in pop psychology books that the titles are tapping into some kind of transferential connection, right? That you've had with another person where the vibes are off so much so that the title of the book can literally be like, how to shoot a narcissist when they're in bed. And the book would sell like what other diagnosis would that be the title?
Daniel Yowell, 2026.
3 pillows or a functional silencer.
How to take out an insurance policy on your narcissistic boss. It's everyone in every element of social relationship, right? Like it's how not raise your kids narcissistic, or what do you do if you have a narcissistic kid? Your dad's narcissistic, mom narcissistic, in-laws narcissistic, wife, husband.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to divorce them, or do you want to make it work? Like, everywhere. It's everywhere.
And also, like, we laugh so that we don't cry, right? Because everybody in this room has had those encounters
100%.
with people who are narcissists and will ruin your life for, sizable periods of time. I don't want anybody to think that we're making fun of like the genuine pain that leads people to seek these kinds of books out, right? It's more that we're reading them symptomatically.
Yeah.
Although I do think Dan is really onto something with the whole silencer.
How to kill your narcissist and get away with it too.
How to hire
while
a
still
hitman to
keeping
kill
your health
narcissists
insurance
on the dark web. Yeah. I mean, it's also got this element to it, just like in the discourse that, like, look, on the one hand, I think we can't overstate the way in which like self-help books in general, and these ones in particular, can really help people. Like even the ones that are like over the top. Like sometimes you're having experiences that are overwhelming, or like you need to have some traction or movement in a personal or professional situation that's otherwise unsupportable.
Shout out to that book, Emotional Vampires, that you gave me once a long time ago. So useful.
Yeah, adult children of emotionally mature parents. That series is actually not bad either.
Oh yeah, that's quite good.
It can give you a crowbar or a ratchet to get out of the situation.
A silencer.
Yeah, another type of tool. And I think that is, as we've, our episodes with Lily Shirless on the value of pop psychology kind of taught us, just because the terms get overused and overapplied doesn't mean they can't also be useful. If anything, it's precisely because they've been so useful that they then get overextended, right?
Yeah. I'm keeping my boundaries regardless of the political metaphors that underlie them.
Yeah. I mean, just because you have like you're wanting to maintain personal boundaries doesn't mean you like want to like give even more funding to ICE. It can in fact be like entirely compatible with defunding ICE, right? And abolishing it. So on the one hand, like these are useful. They can help you get out of a situation, even if the terms themselves and the buzzwords are annoying. Dan, when you try to like think of other terms that have this type of traction, like what does it mean to be married to, or how do you divorce, or how do you make a life with, or how do you become an adult despite being the child of? Another term that pops to my mind is alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's another one of those terms where I'm like, I think people could have all sorts of disagreements with like the meta psychology or the stigmatizing vocabulary or the theological overtones of, say, like Alcoholics Anonymous.
Sure.
Right. Without also being capable of, well, you got to hand it to Alcoholics Anonymous because the program works for people.
Mm-hmm.
It works for a lot of people. Right. Or even something like codependence, which is something we talk with Lily about. Right. I don't necessarily think a person is codependent terminally in the same way they might be an alcoholic, but also I think that's a term that, you self-identify as this, that can help you get out of a situation, seek support.
I mean, you're kind of talking about like skillful means, right?
Yes,
like
I am.
Using words without attaching some sort of like eternal ontological character to them.
Yeah, it's a heuristic, right?
Yeah.
That helps you move out of a thing and or helps you better clarify
a
something.
Functional use of technical vocabulary that you don't necessarily need to be attached to forever.
Exactly. And that's like, again, we have psychoanalytic commitments, right? Like, I don't necessarily believe that I certainly don't believe that the super ego is a thing you can put on a slide in a lab. But I still think heuristically, it's a useful concept for thinking about things.
I was just going to say that I just heard from the lab about the MRI results on your super ego. And
hypertrophied.
That was my joke. God damn it. That was going to be a good joke.
It still is. I mean, just let's run a hypothetical here. Let's sort of flip a script. Dan, you pointed to like the saturation of negative, aggressive language in this.
Revenge. There's like literal revenge language in the titles of some of these books. Yeah. Of vindictiveness.
Yeah.
And it's interesting insofar as that it's like, well, here's the narcissist, a petty, manipulative, cruel motherfucker.
Yeah.
Destroy them, right? You must be. It only takes a narcissist to defeat a narcissist, or like you have to become a narcissist, or like here the narcissist. And I should say there is actually a kind of bleak marketplace of self-identified narcissists doing stuff like, here's dating advice, right?
Can we please write the book Pranking the Narcissist in Your Life, where it's just like 1,000 pranks you can pull?
Gaslighting the gaslighter. Like, become the meta abuser, right? But like, note, if you flip that script, right? If I'm like, how do you deal with having an alcoholic partner?
Outdrink them.
Yeah, become an alcoholic yourself. Like, no, that doesn't quite work somehow.
The example of alcoholism in parallel to narcissism is interesting in that if I was to self-identify as an alcoholic to somebody, it does a lot of work, a lot of like non-judgmental work. I can communicate a lot about myself and like patterns of my behavior to another person in a way that doesn't engender like hostility. But I don't think I would ever self-identify to somebody as a narcissist to explain like patterns and behavior the same way that I would an alcoholic. Like right? Isn't it like it's much more socially acceptable to like meet a new group of friends and say like, hey, yeah, I had my problems with alcohol. I'm an alcoholic, and people are like, okay, word. Like they'll just give that,
I'm in recovery.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
but you wouldn't identify as a recovering narcissist,
right?
Probably.
Right.
Well, you also certainly couldn't be like apologize for some behavior ahead of time or
like I'm sorry, I'm going to treat you very poorly because I'm a narcissist.
Right.
By the time we're done together, your psyche will be in shreds, and you will be in the fetal position on the floor, wondering what you have done wrong.
Right? Yeah, like that hits different from being like, I'm just going to be drinking soda water with lime all evening, right? There's something else going on there.
Yeah.
About the interpersonal relationship as opposed to like just a relationship to a substance, even if it never is just to a substance.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest also that what this indexes, and this is also related to Dan's point about the language of revenge in a lot of these titles, which I don't agree is necessarily about like becoming a narcissist in order to like out narcissist the narcissist. I think it's about being victimized and trying to get justice. That would be and justice and revenge. There's a fine line between those two. But what I think is going on here, and I think this is going to show up throughout this whole series, is that while therapy speak has come to permeate a lot of the ways that we talk about relationships, at least in our particular cultural context at this particular moment in time, we have not found a way to disentangle the discourse about narcissism from moral judgments. Whereas, and it might have been true at other points in time that alcoholism wasn't something that we could disentangle from moral judgments. But now we have a much more robust way of understanding that as disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily as a character flaw. Whereas we now have this like huge mess of things that get understood as narcissism, ranging from a category or a diagnosis in the DSM of like a kind of person that you are to the kind of man that you're going to meet on Tinder and is going to ruin your life to some sort of like monster, essentially. And we don't have tidy ways of pulling all of that apart.
It also seems, Abby, that thinking about this critically or just trying to take a step back from it means we have to ask some questions about some of the terms that you use that are very much at hand, but also have a lot riding on them. Like the idea of a character flaw.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is incidental to who I truly am.
Yeah.
The idea of what a character is as like a thing that you have or are or play. And also a kind of like distinction between your experience of somebody, what somebody did to you, what you're going to do to that somebody, and like a desire to label things and people in terms of essences.
Yes. I think that's crucial.
And I'm thinking about that in light of what you said. And I think you're right, Abby, that it's not the case that like literally these books that we just named are like how to become a narcissist in order to get rid of narcissism, right? Because clearly that would, among other things, well, that might help the industry of narcissistic self-help books because like you're always generating more clients, right? But there is a way in which...
Talk about your narcissistic supply.
one of the few, like, it's an actually energy efficient.
This is how we're going to revitalize the publishing industry. Narcissists, start reading.
So like, even if we grant that, yes, these books are not like literally going to turn you into a narcissist by simply reading it, which is an interesting anxiety to sit with for a second. There's also this way in which it's like, okay, sure, I have been wronged by this other person. This other person made me experience a trauma. I have to process this trauma. I have to do something to change my life. I need something out of this experience. And perhaps I'm going to pick up a book that's going to frame me getting what I need in terms of a revenge or using their own mechanisms back on them or whatever it is. But let's be very clear here. That doesn't make me into what they are. I'm just doing a thing to them because of what they did to me. But what they did to me is because of who they actually are.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to push very hard on that to see there being a kind of tension there.
You're listening to Ordinary Unhappiness, a podcast about psychoanalysis, politics, pop culture, and the ways we suffer now. Ordinary Unhappiness is completely supported, made possible, and kept ad-free for everyone, including our free listeners, by the generous support of our Patreon community. We couldn't do it without you. You make it so we don't have to do unethical things like shill for AI therapy just to keep the podcast going. So if you can, and if you'd also like 2 additional episodes per month, including our takes that are too spicy for in front of the paywall, and also our journey through the standard edition, please come find us at patreon.com/ordinaryunhappiness. I'm Abby Kluchin.
I'm Patrick Blanchfield.
I'm Danielle.
So, Patrick, you're so vain. You thought you could lead us through a narcissism episode series. No, it's true. Patrick is our fearless leader in this. Where do you want to start?
Well, first, I demand a cult of personality. If we're going to do that, I want full narcissistic do. I want a gold statue of me rotating on a high mountaintop somewhere nearby.
We can make it happen.
No.
But if we started now, this is what Ordinary Unhappiness is narcissism summer.
Yeah.
Is that what we're calling it? We need
narcissism summer.
Yeah.
It's what Brat Summer wished it could have been.
Yeah. So by the end of the summer, we'll have it erected somewhere.
It's what hot white boy summer always was.
This is not going to be done until 2027.
Yeah. Apparently,
let's be honest with
narcissism
ourselves.
It's pretty intense, gigantic, deep, weird.
Hydra-headed.
Oh my God. And starting to do the reading for this, I reached out to the two of you and I was like, what isn't narcissism? You got to, maybe that would be easier to start covering.
What is a narcissism?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, what is a narcissist?
Yeah. We kind of got to ask people who are listening to this to be capable of hearing us say the same word a lot without
having it mean different things.
Yeah. Well, while having it mean different things, and also sometimes hearing us do like air quotes around it as a gesture, where like we'll be like narcissism, by which we mean people talking about narcissism or people fighting over what they think narcissism is, rather than our being like, here is what narcissism is under a microscope across time. You can like detect it with your tricorder or some shit. Like this is a completely
with your what?
Tricorder. It's a Star Trek tool.
We already got Star Wars from her. She's
I don't do Star Trek.
Yeah. Oh, Star Trek is cooler.
That's a really different episode that I don't care about.
A neoliberal fantasy, but neither here nor there. But yeah, we're going to be talking about narcissism for a while because people want it. Like it seems like a useful thing. And it also is going to be a nice way for us to, well, hell, I mean, not to be too narcissistic about this. We're nearly 150 episodes in the bag.
Yeah.
And I figured that in addition to being a, unfortunately, always, if not continually more salient topic, narcissism also gives us an opportunity to really to hit some classics and like some things I think we've been refining together, the three of us and the community of listeners, in terms of like, well, not just what's a way to think psychoanalytically about useful things or culture or important interpersonal relationships, but also to kind of like do a grand tour of how properly psychoanalytic concepts, right? Concepts that have psychoanalytic history and texture have become part of the culture in which we move without our even necessarily knowing that they are psychoanalytic or knowing that the ways in which psychoanalysis might help clarify the ways we use those terms culturally.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole "we all speak Freud today" bit with which Peter Gay starts all of his intros to the work of Freud really, I think, applies here.
Narcissism, clearly, as we'll see, is a term that, pre-existed Freud in various senses. But when we talk about it as a problem, or we identify someone in our life as the relational black hole.
Yeah.
Or even
we are drawing on psychoanalytic terms and history and arguments also, because, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, like, this is a vexed concept. This is not a concept where everybody, not that this is true of like anything in the world of psychoanalysis, but where like everyone lines up and is like, yeah, we pretty much agree on what this is, what it looks like, what causes it, what the interpersonal dynamics are, what its etiology is. No, like this is like one of the things that they used to say to teachers all the time is like, teach the conflicts. This is a real good example of that.
So by the end of today's episode, so this is the first of, as of yet to be numbered length series. We'll find out. I feel like if we say a number, it'll be like 2 times, 3 times that. It'll be the Winnicott problem all over again.
It's going to be at least 10.
Yeah. So this is going to be the first of a lot of episodes, but from looking at the outline here, I'm hoping that by the end of the episode, folks listening will have a better understanding, if not of narcissism specifically, but of the complexity around it and a couple different ways of thinking with and about it.
Yeah. And that'll cue us up to then move through like a grand tour of a history of the concept of narcissism and, from ancient times and then specifically from the beginning of the 20th century onwards, and like a survey of the cultural landscape of people talking about narcissism and its politics. At which point it might be helpful for us to take a step back and list some of the spaces, places, genres, and modes in which we encounter people talking about narcissism and or narcissists.
In my head, like I think about all the stories that I hear from folks, like we'll be at a bar and talking and inevitably parents comes up. And that's usually the first descriptor I hear lobbed about an overbearing parent. I have a narcissistic mother.
Yeah. I think also narcissistic boss, narcissistic colleague. In the world of academia, narcissistic supervisor or advisor, that shows up a lot too. But that's just a subspecies of narcissistic boss.
I don't know how universal this experience is, but I know like in some of the, like especially male groups that I run in, if you spend a little bit too much time on an outfit or on like a hairstyle or something, narcissistic will be lobbed at you because you like cared about your appearance in one way or another. It's like a way of like belittling somebody for caring about themselves.
With a strongly gendered flavor to it, right? It has something to do with how are you relating to your body publicly or not publicly in some sort of way that we want to stigmatize. Yeah.
Well, I would just like to intervene in that and say that, Dan, I think your fit is fire today.
Yeah, great, Dan.
Oh, thanks. I'll put that in my supply.
I'm thinking about other places where we encounter narcissism. I'm thinking like breakups,
romance.
Yeah, this is
like
both like coming and going. So like you're looking through people's profiles. You're like, I don't know. And by the way, just let's pause for a second and think about like determining which selfie or like sorting selfies on a dating site for relative narcissism. Being like, hey, this guy is a narcissist, but this other person who has a picture of themselves
with
on a dating site with a fish, or they're surrounded by the people who they're helping in some sort of pro-social narcissism. I won't start but like, can we just sit with this for 1 second? Like again, like narcissism of a site on which like literally
Well, of the various selfies. And this is like, now we're like kind of getting into the realm, which we'll talk much more about, of like the idea, you know, that is not limited to Christopher Lasch, of the culture of narcissism. Like the very idea of like person who takes a lot of selfies.
Yeah.
The idea of, I mean, what Dan was talking about is like, that's someone just saying you're self-absorbed or you're self-obsessed or like you care too much about you and not enough about other people. So like these things get conflated because you can be self-absorbed without having narcissistic personality disorder, for instance.
It just seems like narcissism is something that somebody can be. They are narcissistic. It's something that you can perform in a moment and then not be doing it the next moment, like flipping through too many selfies or taking too many selfies. It's an insult that you can lob at somebody. It's a defense that you can use for why I take too long to prepare before I go out or something like that. It's like all of these things are the same word, and I don't understand it.
I think the transactional, relational uses of the term, in other words, like its dynamic function, is really the thing to keep going back to. Like, who is using it when, in what way?
Yeah.
Right. And then you start get a sense of how this word that seems like one word, or at least is the same cluster of vowels and consonants, actually can mean very, very different things to the same person, even over the course of a conversation or an article. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking here about like how there is this kind of like, it's a touchstone that it's not just about like identifying something in somebody else. It's also a touchstone for talking about that somebody else to a third party. Right.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, like you're going through the selfies and you're like, okay, this is the person I'm going to match with. This is not the person I'm going to match with. Like there's that filter being like, I'm weeding out the narcissist to begin with. And then later, let's say you have a relationship with them and then you have a breakup and you're describing why you broke up. And maybe you'll be like, oh, I discovered that they were actually a narcissist all along. Okay, that's one way you could find it out. Or maybe you'll be like, oh, this person's terrible. They did this to me. They did that to me. And then your friend, being a good friend, will be like, wow.
Textbook narcissist.
Textbook narcissist. And they may even say something like, oh, yeah, we thought that they had that going on all along. You're like, well, why didn't you tell me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's this question of like, how could this thing that supposedly I'm on a guard for and not trying to fall into the, you know, the gravitational pull of get me? And then how also later can I realize that I was got anyways? And you're constantly running into it, even as you're running from it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like to get a little more technical, but not yet into the realm of like, how do different psychoanalysts approach this concept? If you even look at the DSM, you'll get a lot of descriptors that to the casual eye seem like they might be incompatible. So you might hear a lot about like extreme grandiosity, charisma, people being like larger than life, but at the same time, you know, like too into themselves, right? But then at the same time, people who are excessively fragile, excessively vulnerable, who might have like a false kind of sense of self. And I'm not saying these things aren't actually reconcilable. I'm saying that if you step into this world for the first time, you might really be like, how can somebody be like at once totally grandiose and extraordinarily vulnerable? Like, how can they be so focused on the self, but so dependent on others? These are things that actually are psychologically legible, but they seem logically incompatible.
Yeah.
And I think that quickens the sense of like, we always have to be on our guard to spot them, because with their wiles, narcissists can be lurking anywhere, ready to do you severe emotional harm.
You can't break up with a narcissist without falling in love with them first. Like there's, a sneakiness to it. Well, I feel like what we're describing, Patrick, and can I say your like favorite word on this podcast?
Please.
If you're a newcomer, you're going to learn this word real quick. You're describing overdetermination.
Hell yeah. Ding, 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 ding. and yeah, overdetermined. And we're going to gloss this for people who were
We're
first
giving
time
Dan an
caller.
honorary doctorate now. he's done. He's graduated.
PH Dan.
For something to be overdetermined means that it's too many meanings. it's
dripping with meaning.
Yeah, it's too
and I
many
mean
meanings.
that in the grossest way possible.
Overflow. Its cup is running over. It means too many things. Like it's not a one thing.
Yeah.
Right? You can't like
it's multiply determined.
It's multiply determined. So on the level of meaning, it's too much. It's excessive. There's
it's a word with baggage.
Yeah. But also it's not just a word on the level of, something you could find in a dictionary or a thesaurus. It also has some sort of relationship to like actual struggles between people or historical developments. Like hell, we kind of buried the lead on this, but if you were to go back into the DSM, i.e. the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, we're dealing, by the way, with what are called nosological texts, NOSOLOGICAL, and the word nose there has to do with diseases, right? So it's a systematic account of different diseases. We're used to thinking about some types of diseases as getting names that reflect the fact that they appear in certain moments when they previously didn't exist, right? I don't know, like, COVID-19 comes to mind.
Yeah.
Dan.
I don't think about like mental apparati breaking or malforming in fresh and novel ways. That just doesn't enter into my mind at all.
Right, the lab leak mind hypothesis.
Yeah.
Like there's some wet market deep inside your brain.
New narcissism just dropped.
Actually, one just did, but that's for a later episode.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
we got some exciting social media narcissist pathologies.
Right,
but yeah, like if you go to earlier editions of the DSM,
it's like the Bible of psychiatry in America, right?
Yeah, it's among other things, like if you're billing a healthcare company, it's going to give you a code as you're going to get diagnosed with something with a number, and that's going to be legible. But, well, there's something funny about narcissism in that.
Wait, you mean that it doesn't show up until DSM-3, until 1980?
Yeah.
So 1 and 2, it was not billable to treat a narcissist.
Yeah, and in fact, like the phrase...
There's a Reagan joke in here somewhere, but I'm reaching for it.
Well, it does have this kind of specifically historically bound character that we could even push back to like you can make a case that like American psychiatry doesn't really start talking about narcissism until 1968, right? Or it doesn't begin to start talking about narcissism until the late 1960s and the work of Heinz Kohut. And then that gradually moves through institutional sort of channels. And then, by the 1980s and DSM-3, now it's a disorder that you can find in the book. But then that would leave us in this strange position of being like, well, did narcissists not exist until the DSM-3 acknowledged the term? Were there no narcissistic people before that? Or like, there's something about
and the granular truth is, of course, like there's this writing by, Kohut and Kernberg for the most part. And as with the way that all of these things get revised, there's a task force and a committee, right? And they end up influenced by these writings. The very large group of people that is involved in putting together the DSM every time there's a revised one, because this is like a huge undertaking, has to agree that this is something worth including. It doesn't necessarily mean that prior to 1980, there were no narcissists. And in fact, everybody was really self-effacing.
Right. Before cake, there was eggs, there was flour.
Yeah.
It does highlight for us, and I love, Abby, that you're invoking the institutional, specifically like the bureaucratic meetings.
That's how that sausage gets made. A lot of meetings.
We're not talking about elements in the periodic table, or at least, the ones that don't exist just for a fraction of a second in a lab, right? Like this is a term.
It's a human endeavor.
And that is produced and ratified by certain particular institutions in historical time. It enters the vocabulary. It doesn't just get like written down into the DSM, but also like literally it becomes something doctors are saying to their patients more consistently. It becomes something that then patients will talk about in, among themselves or in relation to their families. And it begins to have a sort of cultural life in addition to its clinical life.
Yeah.
And so to think about this in terms of overdetermination, right? Like here's a word that means many things to many people within these professional communities, right? Like there are doctors debating what is narcissism really just a set of traits that we can list? Is it certain features, or is it the way a person is structured, right?
Mm-hmm.
All these sort of like fairly technical questions. They debate it. There's some sort of output. And that output matters. It also matters in like courtrooms where you then will have forensic psychiatrists being like, well, this person is a malignant narcissist and they're not going to like treatment is not going to help them. Right.
Right. But somebody had to make up that term, malignant narcissist.
Exactly.
Right.
Which doesn't mean that it isn't real or it doesn't capture something real, but it just means that it's also human made. It's part of like the human reality that we're all functioning in.
So you're saying, so narcissism, it's a subject, it's a verb, it's an object, it's a position, it's a cultural phenomenon, it's a diagnostic term, it's overdetermined. It's a lot of things.
It's not a verb.
So then, it's not a verb?
It's not a verb.
I'm narcissisting all over us right now. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's all these things at once. It's all these things at once, right?
It has many meanings and it comes from many places. So
then
it's the second half of overdetermination. It's causally produced.
The big ask then for everybody listening now, and for us here in the room too, the big ask will be, let's put the guns down. Let's well, I mean, we can't like forget everything. This isn't a mattress commercial. Forget everything you know about narcissism. Yeah, obviously we're not going to do that.
You're going to like the way you look.
Oh, that's good. No
Gen Z listener is going to get that.
We're going to set all that stuff aside. Do our best to set all this stuff aside, and let's try to approach this term as though we're learning it for the first time. Let's
beginner's mind.
Well, another Patrickism. We're going to sneak up on it.
That's me.
Oh, that's an Abby?
Yeah.
Well, then we're going to pull an Abby. We're going to sneak up on it.
Notoriously sneaky Abby.
All right, I'm really excited about this series, guys. Honestly, you had the idea to make this series when you encountered this one listener. This is actually all about them. And you think that might be you?
Yeah, and if you're a free listener, I mean, like, look, I mean,
is
maybe you got to
you?
subscribe to get the.
Is it not?
All right, we should get into it. Let's get into it.
Let me just hit the term one more time for people who are just joining us for the first go. Overdetermination, right? Something that is not reducible to a single meaning, right? It means many things in many different ways for different people. And that's also the output of a bunch of interacting processes, i.e. dynamic stuff, in a way that isn't reducible to any one single cause and effect, right? Many meanings, many causes, messy in both directions. The analysis in psychoanalysis is best thought of as a way of thinking about overdetermined things systematically. It's analysis, not synthesis, because in synthesis, you take lots of individual things and you build them together to get something.
Mm-hmm. Something bigger.
In analysis, you start with a messy totality and you try to take it apart.
You decompose it.
Without necessarily knowing where it's going to lead. And Freud, when he sort of coins the term psychoanalysis, is really leaning on this Greek geometric and logical tradition that opposes analysis to synthesis in these two ways. So, if narcissism is an overdetermined term and a quintessentially psychoanalytic term, it kind of also stands to reason that psychoanalysis, as like this enterprise of unpacking overdetermination, offers us the ideal tools for thinking about narcissism, both in terms of content, but also in terms of orientation.
All of this very useful, especially for people who are new to Ordinary Unhappiness. I think it might also be helpful to retread some ground that we introduced way back in episode 1 and which we've invoked from time to time since then, which is the sort of 3 baskets model of psychoanalysis, which is actually a Pat Blanchfield original, except in the sense that it is the language of the 3 baskets is totally taken from ways of thinking about like the Buddhist canon. Will you walk people back through this structure again? And folks, I know we're doing a lot of ground clearing here, but it's going to pay dividends because this is going to be a big series. So we really want to make sure that we have our terms, our keywords, and our structures all in place.
So like, look, people come to psychoanalysis or find psychoanalysis in different ways, right? Sometimes they're doing training and they want to become a mental health professional. Sometimes maybe you just come across a book in a library, or you hear a professor talk about a movie in some particular way, or hell, someone calls something very Freudian and you're like, who is this Freud guy, right? The point is then that psychoanalysis means a lot of different things to different people and encompasses a vast body of literature, tons of articles, some of which are very recognizably medical, others of which are like cultural and, applied, you will. And to kind of help us think about the totality of psychoanalysis in a way that isn't like parochial or proprietary, I've suggested we kind of think about it as like having three primary areas of focus, three domains, or like three baskets, right? What we'll call the clinical, the meta-psychological, and the applied.
So what's the clinical, what's the meta-psychological, and what's the applied?
So like, let's call these three domains, or like the three baskets into which you could put different texts in the field of psychoanalysis, and if you wanted to sort them like that. Clinical stuff, or the clinical focus, is going to be about, well, what happens in clinics, right? It's going to be focused on defining what exactly the work of therapy is. Not in like necessarily the broadest terms, but like in the very specific granular ones, right? You're a recognizable professional type, a mental health practitioner called a psychoanalyst, or someone doing what we call psychodynamic psychotherapy or social work. Could be a lot of things. But you've got a shingle outside your office. Someone comes in. They are expecting something from this encounter. You are supposed to be in a position of helping them. How do you go about helping them? Right? How do you evaluate what their problems are? What are the techniques for you're trying to produce some kind of change in them? For also like guardrails for like, how do you build them? How long is this supposed to be? What's a good outcome? What's a bad outcome? Right? In other words, it's the clinical domain is stuff that's focused on technique, best practices, case histories, individual cases, in other words, of people being in positions of suffering, looking for help, and getting what we would call psychotherapy.
It's the like practice of listening and working through with language in order to alleviate suffering.
Yeah.
That clinical aspect is the practice of therapy, the way like Freud outlined it.
Yeah, exactly. And as subsequent interpreters, and that's why we'll use the phrase psychodynamic, right? They're interpreters of Freud who emphasize they're not trying to vindicate Freudian theory specifically, but just like talk about the unconscious, about conflict, about trade-offs and the like. How do they, like, what's the service that they're offering? And who is their clientele, right? What are the problems that a psychoanalyst is going to treat as opposed to, I don't know, like a physical therapist would treat? Right? Now, and here's where you can immediately start seeing these baskets or these categories kind of necessarily imply one another. If you're going to have a body of literature and a series of professions that involve dealing with individual cases, you probably want to have some sort of theory and orientation that encompasses multiple cases. If you're going to be defining certain individual experiences as not just dispositive of something that we're going to specifically call a disease, right, or label as a disorder, in other words, as pathologies, you're going to need also some sort of way of talking about, or at least some sort of implicit model that's workable of what normality might be, of what the non-pathological is.
You're talking about like a theory of a mind.
Yeah, like what you might call psychology or metapsychology. This is where people have heard things like, well, we talked about it earlier, the superego, or the id, or the unconscious, or something like transference, right? These are mental entities, or these are mental agencies, you could call them. They're processes of how the psyche works, et cetera, that are understood on a level of abstraction and that are formulated theoretically in ways that immediately enter into dialogue with the clinical. It's like, oh, this person is suffering from a trauma. Well, what is a trauma? A trauma is an injury to the ability to remember or feel certain things, right? And then you begin to get more granular about this. But in other words,
this tends to happen at a certain degree of abstraction, right? And that's when, so for instance, let's just give an example, like Freud's essay on the unconscious or on repression. Like those are examples. I'm just going to take Freudian examples here. Those are examples of specifically metapsychological essays, whereas something like repeating, remembering, and working through is within this set of some of his specifically clinical writings. It doesn't mean that they don't share certain ideas or even an author, but you can helpfully, heuristically, provisionally separate these into distinct domains with distinctive characteristics and priorities.
Yeah. And crucially, another aspect of the metapsychological or the psychological domain,
Our second basket.
Thank you, is a concern with development and developmental accounts, right? Because it's not just the psyche of the adult that we're going to care about. It might be, we're seeing kids, but also literally we want to know, how did the adult get to be this way, right? Our account of pathology, how does disorder or disease happen, requires some sort of account of, well, what does normal development look like, right? And can we build some sort of model that allows us to credibly, efficaciously, helpfully intervene in the lives of other people, working like, okay, this thing happened to you at a certain point that probably will have consequences that we're seeing now in this way, and that would be different from if it had happened to you when you were, say, younger or older, right? There's a kind of loose modeling that we're going to need to entertain of like how the present relates to the past in an individual's life cycle that has to have traction in describing individual cases, but then also applying to categories of persons over time in a population.
Okay, so that's 2. What's the third basket?
And the third basket is the one that I like the most, honestly, because it really kind of ties those other 2 together in yet another way. And that's like the cultural or the applied, right? That's a way of thinking about not just like individual psychic life or even the...
Patrick, you should love all of Freud's children equally.
I get to pick and choose. Gives narcissists apply to only some of them. The applied traffics in cultural, overdetermined outputs, right? The applied psychoanalysis, and that might be like, I don't know, like Slavoj Žižek talking about a David Lynch movie. But it also could be
Freud himself putting culture on the couch and being like, why do we need God, huh?
Or fuck America. What a mistake.
Grand mistake, but a mistake nonetheless.
Right. It could explain, or you could use psychoanalytic language to describe like voting habits in a population. You could use them to explain why the Ford F-150 pickup truck is the most popular selling pickup truck in America. That's what you're talking about, like using psychoanalysis to try to understand these like larger dynamics at play.
Yeah, we're looking
and this
for
is
patterns.
where psychoanalysis also becomes like a tool.
Yes.
Like it becomes something that is portable, right? As theory.
Yeah, it becomes part of the
Right.
repertoire of what we might call critical theory, right?
Yeah.
That is, you're trying to describe cultural formations
Mhm.
in a way that, again, non-reductively, not in a monocausal way, is
Right.
trying to account for why are people behaving the way that they are? Why are they feeling the way that they are? Why are these types of media popular? Or hell, I'm thinking about like one of the figures of narcissism we're going to encounter after World War II is like Theodor Adorno, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that Adorno and the Frankfurt School are going to be tasked with doing, accounting for what type of personality, what character type might lend itself to fascism. So the applied domain is a way of thinking about like social disorder, disease, but again, I'm not trying and bracket any like eugenic or negative associations we have with these things, but like social suffering as produced by individuals, but also as encompassing individuals as being bigger than any one person, right? This kind of metaphoric transfer across these domains.
And I would also say that this is where, if you're interested in psychoanalysis and politics, this is where the domain where the rubber hits the road for you.
Exactly. And that's probably where we're going to be taking all of this.
So we have basket 1, clinical. Then we have our basket 2, which is that meta-psychological.
Yep.
And then we have our basket 3, which is like cultural or applied.
Yeah.
And I'm picking up what you're putting down here. We're going to look at narcissism through these 3 lenses, right?
Yes.
And this is going to be great for us, exactly, because narcissism as like a term or like the discourse of narcissism is an example of something that, for our purpose, starts in the clinical space, in describing or being put to describe what is understood at the time to be fairly limited sets of pathological behaviors in a fairly finite population.
Yeah.
To then be to like become more of a metapsychological term. And then as psychoanalysts over the course of multiple, a metapsychological term that's going to like kind of universalize it or make it into a structural thing.
And that's where we're going to see people fighting about the meaning of narcissism.
Yeah. And then there's going to be several decades of internal to psychoanalysis type fights around it.
Yep.
And very different metapsychological and technique level accounts.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into all of those.
And some of them are going to be really interesting. And some of them are made today.
Yeah, really fascinating stories. Yeah.
But then at a certain point, both psychoanalysts and people who have some familiarity with psychoanalysis, either as patients or as just being members of, a public in which psychoanalysis matters, are going to start talking about narcissism culturally. And that's going to...
Cultural critics, you mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The me generation, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's going to from Tom Wolfe onwards, it's going to kick off, right?
Yep.
We're going to spend a lot of time on these intergenerational anxieties. So like basically it's the boogeyman. Every new generation calls the previous generation narcissistic, right? you could literally, I guarantee you can find a Time magazine cover for every generational cadre in the US being like, kids today are too into themselves.
Yeah.
Why aren't they reading Time fucking magazine?
Too busy taking selfies to read Time magazine.
It's so like, why am I not young still?
Yeah.
By David Brooks.
That's always how I read those generations being supplanted and just being angry and bitter. Why is it all about them? It's like, what was about you when you were 25? Shut up.
If I ever did, just put me out to pasture. Just turn me into some type of shitty glue.
Well, yeah, we'll do some narcissistic revenge.
It's fine. I mean,
I have a silencer.
No, ATF, we do not have a silencer. And if we had one, we would have paid the tax stamp on it. We do not. We're not armed with that.
Isn't that crazy? You can just get a silencer.
$200. It's kind of crazy.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
That price has not changed since the 30s.
Yeah. Well, $200, but the silencer costs like $1,600. So, yeah.
Anyways,
so we have our three baskets approach, which is so useful. It's not only for psychoanalysis, but also I think maybe even especially for narcissism. And I think maybe in the future we'll have other series that cover other psychoanalytic language that can cut this many ways. But for narcissism, so useful.
Yeah, we're going to use it as kind of like a filter through which to make sense of this overwhelming amount of literature, whether it is psychoanalytic literature, whether it's cultural criticism, whether it's pop psychology, or whether it's just the ways that people talk about narcissism.
It does seem like there's an ebb and flow from between these three baskets, specifically with narcissism, where I could see like in the late 60s, that whole me generation thing, yada, yada. And like the individual begins being emphasized more and more in culture. And then 30 years later, social media becomes a product that literally makes you the user, the product itself. Right. So like people start noticing them or thinking about themselves more. And then that third basket kicks in where it's like, oh, you're thinking about yourself more? How about you become a product that has to have your own PR department, your own way of customizing your appearance, which then drives more behaviors to start thinking about yourself more, which then would trickle back down to that first basket and then change individual behaviors. So it seems like all this is like these are not fixed baskets with narcissism. It's almost like this current, this wave that's just going back and forth between all of these.
Delightful.
And I think that some of our task is also going to have to be to allow there to be slippage in the ways that we use some of these terms, but while also trying to be more and more precise, right? So like there's going to be questions, like I'll say one that has occurred to me a lot, especially when you think about like the third basket and we think about, the sorts of Jeremiads that have come out regularly for the last 50 some years about how people are getting more and more self-involved and about individualism is like, well, is individualism the same thing as narcissism? Is self-absorption the same thing as narcissism? Does taking selfies mean that you are a narcissist? Does scoring higher on the instrument that is designed to produce a score for how narcissistic you are actually yield something that is meaningful when shorn of that cultural context? I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the mix here that I, as somebody who's coming from the discipline of philosophy, I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like it's a little bit messy to just be like, individualism and narcissism are the same things. And yet we would be remiss if we were like, we're going to pull those things apart separately and tackle them in isolation. So I think that I want to just sort of ask listeners to try to hold these seemingly incompatible things in their minds, which is like, we're going to try to be as precise as possible, but that precision is aimed at language that is so thoroughly overdetermined that we are necessarily going to have to be using the same word at times to mean different things.
And that brings us back to a point that, Dan, you just made, and Abby, you opened with. Narcissism, all caps, bold, is not in the world in the same way that, I don't know, hydrogen dioxide is, right? If I went to a psychiatrist in 1971, and they're not Heinz Kohut, and I were to say, I was raised by a malignant narcissistic father who used my mother for narcissistic supply and abused me in fits of narcissistic rage, that psychiatrist would be like, so you like Greek myths? Or like, I guess he was vain? Are you saying, and literally they probably would be like, are you saying he was maybe gay? Right? Because that was a major sense of this term. Like literally, the term narcissism would not mean that to a mental health professional. However, in the 80s, mid-80s, now it's in the DSM, that is something that the psychiatrist might say to you to clarify circumstances when you didn't know the word. Or maybe, run this through a little bit further, it's the 90s and you're seeing a psychiatrist, or it's the early 2000s and you're seeing a psychiatrist, and you start talking about how narcissistic the people are around you. And this older mental health professional is like, another fucking kid who's constantly on Facebook telling me about how his greatest generation parents, our boomer parents, are the real narcissist. I love my job. Right? In other words, that dynamic push me, pull you thing, where the term is never just a term, but both names and creates something in the social order that then the social order kind of makes into more of a thing or reifies as a thing, or we turn to the term to do all this work such that we can make other things happen. That cycles back around. And it means that you wind up in these really interesting situations where figures in and outside psychoanalysis, figures with varying degrees of familiarity with psychoanalysis, people with no psychoanalysis whatsoever, will start talking about narcissism when what they're really talking about is either some particular psychoanalyst's vision of narcissism, some kind of half-remembered vision of what some psychoanalyst once said about narcissism, or a whole set of cultural grievances that narcissism has just become a container for.
So just so we can be crystal clear, can we map the ways that we're going to tackle narcissism? Can we map that onto these three baskets?
So yeah, narcissism is a clinical term, right? Someone walks into your office and says, I'm recovering from narcissistic abuse. You're a clinician. You're like, okay, I know what this means. This means a certain set of traits in their family, right? Or this is the damage that this person is going to be reporting. Or you might be like, patient comes in and they won't stop talking about it. Everyone they know in their life is the best. Doctor, I'm so glad to see you. You're the best doctor. And I got to tell you, I have the guy, my plumber, he's the best plumber. And my wife, she's the best wife. And literally everyone they know, they're no actual, you guys have no real people. Everything is simply the best, right? You might start thinking, maybe this person is what you might call narcissistic. And then you might start thinking about, well, how am I going to treat them as opposed to if they were just like neurotic or they were depressive, right? Or they were schizophrenic. They're a particular type. I have a certain set of beliefs about narcissism. That means I have to kind of like help them get more shades of gray views of people around them, right? No, maybe your plumber is just a pretty good plumber. And maybe we love your wife, but maybe she's a human being too. You should stop like putting that weight on her. Like, in other words, narcissism is a thing that can be diagnosed clinically. It can be treated and handled through therapy. It's a pathology of some kind, or it's a set of problems in living, if you want to use that language, which is also helpful. And we have certain best practices or expectations about how to go about handling it.
Okay, so that's bucket one.
Now we're in the realm of like the meta-psychological concept, right? And you could already tell, I suspect, how some of that was bleeding into the first category. Namely, so I could diagnose this person as being a narcissist In other words, I could make some sort of judgment about them as either having, let's say, a set of traits or an entire like personality structure. Maybe not even just a personality structure, but we might call a personality disorder. That raises the question of, well, what do I mean by a personality?
And what does it mean for it to be disordered?
Yeah, what are the other disorders that we're comparing it to? Right?
What's order?
Yeah, well, what does order even look like?
Right, yeah.
Right? And then you might be like, well, how did they get this personality disorder? When did the disorder start? Well, how is personality normally formed? Is personality formed? Are narcissists formed? Or are they made or born? Or right? You have to have some sort of
origin story.
Yeah, some sort of origin story, some sort of story about how things go wrong, i.e. pathology. You have to have some kind of broad mapping for like trying to get a handle on this person's interior life.
And, if we're working with things like excessive focus on the self, right? Well, what is an appropriate amount of focus on the self without crossing over into being overly self-absorbed or narcissistic? And also, what's a self, right? Is it like is it something that inheres in the world, right? Is it a state of being? Is it a stage? Is it a structure? Is it a straitjacket? I mean, there's a lot of different ways of parsing this and a lot of questions that are going to have to be input to arrive at any kind of meaningful conclusions.
And all those broad questions have very real clinical implications, even as the people who you're seeing clinically or psychoanalysis, tries to treat different people. The data of those clinical encounters is going to reach back and change the metapsychological accounts of them.
It is, but also the therapeutic encounters are being informed by the metapsychological concepts that any given clinician is carrying with them, or their particular commitments.
So that may sound very abstract. So let's give you a couple examples here real quick.
Do it.
And let me just repeat. If there are n number of psychoanalysts out there, there are n+1 definitions of what narcissism is. This is not a monolithic concept. Like Freud has 5 or 6 different versions of it. I was looking at some really good surveys of literature. I was looking at some materials like surveying different schools of thought in the creation of between the period of the DSM-4 TR and DSM-5, being like, we can identify 40 different, roughly 40 different robust accounts of what narcissism is across the psychotherapeutic professions, and they're all different. And I'm like, okay, there are so many different variations of these terms that what really I think matters is keeping an eye on, again, the function, right? What are we trying to describe? What do we take as being the important ingredients to the landscape at any given encounter? And so there are some psychoanalysts early on who will say, well, narcissism is really a sexual perversion that involves a relationship to your own body in a kind of facile way. No, it's already kind of crypto-moralizing there. That involves you're not interested in another, let alone another of a different sort of plumbing repertoire. And clearly that's going to affect how they treat patients, particularly the patients who have the misfortune of not being straight in their care. Subsequent psychoanalysts might also take the view that, well, actually narcissism is not necessarily always about sexuality, nor is it even necessarily gendered in quite the same way. It's about a type of, they're overly concerned with perfectionism, right? And they'll lean into that, and maybe they'll have some developmental accounts of like, well, how do we teach a child to be really what periods of time does a child learn, to be perfect, to be clean, to be the best? How might that reflect something about the parental milieu, right? So now a developmental angle is coming in here. And you might be like, well, okay, and other analysts are different points are going to take stages like, well, maybe actually narcissism it's a kid getting stuck. The quintessentially psychoanalytic phrase, arrested development, is related to this, right? A kid is stuck at a certain point in development, and now they're kind of stuck in this kind of childlike narcissistic phase. And I should say, that's the idea of childhood being kind of narcissistic kind of makes sense. Kids don't shut up about what's going on with them. Look what my stuffed animal has done. Look at this drawing I drew. You can't be like, a kid's a shitty fucking drawing. Another hair. Fuck you. Come on. You can't do that because the kid is.
Because it's developmentally appropriate.
Exactly. It's developmentally appropriate, right? And the kid who's saying my best friend can fly or my best friend is the best friend, that is acceptable and understandable in a way in which someone refusing to hear anything about your life to tell you about how they know the best person in every possible profession or world, that's not as acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. And we might even be like, oh, there's a kind of a childlike aspect to this. So you might have some clinicians who are going to be like, well, so if you get stuck at this stage, all I need to do in my therapy is kind of like meet you where the child within you is and help you go through that. Maybe you didn't get the affirmation you needed as a child, or maybe you got too much affirmation. Whatever it is, I'm going to give you a quote unquote corrective emotional experience. You're going to move on.
So like making a holding space for them or something like that. Yeah.
And note, this is a whole model of therapy that's also a model of development that applies to an individual case, but that's drawn from multiple cases. You're also going to have psychoanalysts during the same period, and now I'm thinking here of Heinz Kohut versus Otto Kernberg in the 60s and 70s, who are going to encounter patients who are apparently much more profoundly disturbed or who are much more resistant to certain types of therapy and who don't seem to benefit from that type of mirroring and caring, and who also sometimes will reveal that they have traumas in their developmental history that are more profound. And this is going to lead some clinicians to be like, oh, maybe it's not a developmental arrest, but it's like literally it's a developmental detour, or it's like you went onto a different track, and narcissism might be the best option, or like was the things that we now call narcissism in the adult are actually a survival mechanism developed by a child when the alternative would have been like psychic death or schizophrenia or something, right? These are, again, we're not going to venture in, let alone on this episode, as to which one of these is like correct or not, but no, the word narcissism is going to do work in all of these cases, right? And to the point which, again, radically different developmental accounts, clinical presentations, and as we'll get to in a second, cultural sort of stakes apply. That brings us into the cultural.
That third basket.
And this is what the basket that I assume most listeners are going to be the most readily familiar with. And it's where we started with all of the pop psychology books, for instance.
It's like, where do we encounter narcissists?
Your local library.
At work.
Yeah.
At home.
In culture, in relationships.
Where don't I encounter narcissists?
And like, that's where like narcissism, I think this is before we get really meta and start to talk about what does the psychopathology or a thick understanding of narcissism say about the way in which people kind of narcissistically continually return to the question of narcissism. Like, we're really interested in reading books about narcissism, non-narcissistically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we the real narcissists? I wonder about myself innocently. Like, there's this kind of like, before we got on that meta level, I think we could say that narcissism as a concept does work for describing a whole lot of formations that are bigger than any individual, that involve multiple individuals.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
It's sticky. Like it's one of those words it attaches very well, with like an enormous amount of like utility to so many readily available, like kind of already teed up criticisms of culture, American or otherwise.
And all, not even necessarily just criticisms, but also just like accounts of how.
Yeah, I mean
like,
that in the sense
form.
of like cultural criticism, not in the sense of like necessarily critique, although some of it will be critique.
Yeah, but think about like the idea of a group with a charismatic leader, right? How does that leader get to be so charismatic, right?
Yeah.
Famously,
how do charismatic leaders get people to do what they want?
Yeah, like
how do they get them to give away all of their possessions?
Yeah, from like family systems to cults to political parties, right? Like,
yeah.
What sports team allegiances?
Exactly.
Oh my God, I won the Super Bowl this year. We won the Super Bowl
this year.
Do
not alienate all of our Knicks fan listeners right now, please.
No.
Our Knicks fans listeners.
I told a nurse the other day, I was like, I was in New York and people were really happy. I felt good about the Knicks. She's like, are you a Knicks fan? I'm like, no, I could feel the joy. And she's like, good, because like I've heard enough from them. This is literally 2 days after it happened. Yeah.
But still it applies. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, all of social media, or like the idea that you need your own PR department, essentially.
Yeah, that's like a narcissistic injury when it turns out. There is a.
Yeah. I mean, some people listening will not be old enough to remember days when you didn't have to like craft your own brand in order to like get a job just to pay the rent and eat food, buy groceries.
Or what about toxic fandoms?
Yep.
Or if you say something bad about the new T Swift album, that there will be a, I don't even want to tread on that. Yeah.
Brouhaha.
Well, like a new Star Wars movie announces its cast, and the like fascist wing of Star Wars fans don't like the pigment of one of the actors or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. All that stuff. It like everything can relate back to the self in a way that's like injurious and worth avenging.
George Lucas, how dare you participate in the broader woke decay of culture by not making me a Star Wars that makes me feel as good as mac and cheese for breakfast when I was 8 did?
Marvel fans that are angry, about I can't identify with any of these super men. Like,
and then we would be like, why exactly does personal identification have to be the chit of cultural currency? Right? Yep. That's a given thing that probably we can kind of denature. I mean,
it wasn't, I'm going to show my age here, but it wasn't until about like 15, 20 years ago in classrooms that the word relatability started showing up as like, I didn't like this book because the characters weren't relatable. The assumption being that there needs to be some sort of work of identification done in order for there to be a meaningful reading experience or one that's like worthwhile, because like it doesn't like. And we get that. What is that little online Patrick Gilney little meme? Like, I do not like when it's not about
me.
When not about me. None of these examples are for us to like kind of neatly co-sign the diagnosis. Of we are living in a narcissistic culture. I for one want to bracket whether or not we want to make any normative judgments like that until way, way further into the series. The point right now is just to see the ways that this discourse does already exist, and the ways that it is weaponized against younger generations also.
And also, I mean, and sometimes gets weaponized in the other direction too, right? It's an artifact of cultural struggle.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, let's say weaponized between and among generational cohorts.
And I think this gets into really, I think people can begin to see now why also we're interested in this in the way that we are and trying to step back from any particular psychoanalytical account to kind of think about this in its thickest, most overdetermined sense. Gets into properly like political questions, right? About how do things like, I don't know, like corporate cultures or the market economy or a two-party system or mass media or social media, how do the remarkable organs of political economy and social reproduction, how do they seemingly select for certain types of personalities, right? Are there more narcissists in C-suites? Like, what's going on with the psychology of a person who's going to be president? I mean, like, what actually should we be expecting from these people if you run for this type of thing? Or another question you might ask, and this is where things get like, again, we're asking you to think in an extra moral or a beyond good and evil kind of space. I had a conversation this morning very helpfully with a clinician who was like, well, if I'm on trial and I need a defense attorney, I want him to be a narcissist. Right? If I'm in a position where I need someone to advocate compellingly on my behalf, I want them to be good looking and charismatic and to care about their impact on people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, if we're on Polymarket and we're making the bets on like YouTube star view counts or some shit, right? Or like literally, if we were like in a talent agency.
We're not doing that though, right?
All my money's on Mr. Beast. I have diversified into SpaceX Mr. Beast tranches where he's going to go to space.
That's okay. We didn't need to retire.
Never will. You want someone is YouTube like telegenic.
There are times when that's the thing that you need to get by in 2026 of what Freud would say, like the coin of the realm. Sometimes narcissism, fits the bill.
And this is where we start talking about like stuff that's very, very modern. Like we're talking about like the self under conditions of contemporary selfhood, right? Relationships under conditions of contemporary market economies. That's different from, but also in an interesting relationship with like older substrates or layers of thinking about not just narcissism, though we got a lot of that in terms of like, what the hell is going on with clavicular, right? Like, I mean, like, what's this guy's relationship, like, really to himself seems to really cry out for an early analysis in some ways, in terms of sort of this gendered kind of.
I would love that. Can we please have that episode?
I mean, like his primary erotic object is himself, right? Like he literally says, like, he's voluntaristically celibate because like that actually diminishes his mogging time, right? Like,
just FYI, women have been lick-smaxing way before clavicular. Let's not let him steal all of the valor.
You're right. You just mogged me, Abby.
I'm mogging you every time we're in the same room, babe.
What's the line about? Is it William Safire? His line is about how a conservative is a liberal who is mugged by reality. I'm wondering about like a narcissist who gets mugged by. Sorry. All right. Anyway, there are like these older levels of like not even just like early 19th century, right? Early 20th or the early 20th century, sort of like, you know, homophobic moralizing or like gendered moralizing about masculinity and femininity and over self-regard and the like, but like really deep discourses about like vanity, right? Or superficiality, or even like causing other people harm by being preoccupied with something that both involves but excludes them, which is why actually for our next episode, we're going to read some myths that I'm going to throw at you all, right? But the idea here then is that this is a term that does work for better and worse. It still does work. And we're going to work through it. And hopefully, apart from just giving you a cultural history of the 20th century through narcissism, right? There's a reason like Adam Curtis calls that documentary A Century of the Self, right? Mm-hmm. This is a really touchstone concept. We'll give you all better tools for thinking about claims we encounter all the time, right? People are becoming more narcissistic, right? Or this is an irredeemably narcissistic culture, or this other culture is not narcissistic, right? Or is maybe not narcissistic in the same way, right? For evaluating these things both skeptically, but also like usefully, and extracting what is maybe politically helpful or personally helpful for them in each and every context that we go through. Because again, this is a dynamic concept.
One thing I want to chime in with here also, and I know that you nodded to it in terms of clavicular, and also in terms of thinking about some terms that are sort of like out of fashion right now, like vanity, frivolity. In some contexts now, like if I were to like accuse the Kardashians of vanity and frivolity, well, I mean,
it's the brand, baby.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like, I'm rubber, you're glue, right? There's that kind of element to it that doesn't land as like searing cultural critique, right? But I do think that one thing, and I'm bringing this up partly because you two guys are dudes, is
what? Just kidding.
Is that I think it's going to be really important to look at some material that we will find certainly in resources for in, say, feminist theory, as well as like both contemporary and historical, as well as some like there's really good writing now on the extremes that people go to modify their bodies for the sake of beauty. And I think that if we are going to not only look at like the looming figure of like the male narcissist who does you wrong romantically, right? Which is like kind of another word for like, if we're really going with like pop psych stereotypes, the anxiously attached guy that ghosts you or whatever. That's deeply, deeply gendered. The other way that we have that's easy, that's ready to hand in culture with which to indict people in terms of their narcissism is very much gendered feminine. And it is all about caring about the body and the surfaces of the body and how one is seen as opposed to who one is. And I think it's important just to flag that this is also about embodiment and about the ways that we shape and brand ourselves and our physical bodies.
So far, this has been a weird have we ever had an episode like this where we talk about our plans this much?
No, because we've never, well, I plan out this far all the time, but we've never planned like an arc that is so long where we need to see where we're going. Like, because like the standard edition and whatnot, we're just like, we read along and see where it goes.
Well, I like Narcissism, Narcissummer 2026. It's upon us. We're doing it. Mm-hmm. So wait, so far today, just to recap, we got, when we started this podcast, we looked at psychoanalysis through the lens of the uncanny, which is like this universally kind of, we've all felt that feeling before. It's a great way into it. Here, it seems like we're going to start looking at psychoanalysis through this lens of narcissism, which is another kind of, it seems, universally encountered phenomenon. We got our 3 baskets of psychoanalysis again. We had our 3 baskets reflected through the lens of narcissism. We've heard all about narcissism and culture. And Patrick, I'm looking at the outline of this. You just have, we'll play the game as the last bullet in our plans here.
It also says, this is a surprise.
Yeah. And I'm a little nervous.
This is what happens when we let Patrick make the outline.
This is when he pulls the gun out. This is when we learn what a silencer is.
Shit.
And Dan, I really appreciate that too, because like if the uncanny was like us beginning with, here is a feeling that you have, psychoanalysis has a word for it.
Yeah.
Narcissism is, here's a word you keep hearing.
Psychoanalysis can help you understand what it actually means.
Yeah, exactly. And note, like, I know we also haven't like read a single definition of narcissism yet. We're not going to. Yeah, like,
gotta say that.
Because like, no, like whatever you think it is, think that, but also hold it in abeyance, right?
This is an episode of unpacking. We're still unpacking. We're sorting our laundry. Next episode, we'll start putting it away.
But also,
no, absolutely not.
I want us to have
like, we're living out of the suitcase for a while.
I want us to not have any commitment to jargon at all in this, right? Yeah. Like we may have used some buzzwords here, but hopefully we've glossed them all, right? But like, we're not trying to convert anyone to any particular, or convert someone to like, this has to be the correct understanding of what narcissism is, right? Mm-hmm. Like, though there is an ultra secret Patreon tier where we do name the generation that is the most narcissistic, and we do talk about the person who is the most narcissistic in your life. But
what's this game?
But yeah, like I wanted to like take a step back from all this and ask us to think about, well, I wanted us to think about a type of encounter that people have. And it's not a therapy encounter, but it is a encounter that may either send you to therapy or may give you the healthcare that you need in order to pay for therapy.
This doesn't sound like a game yet.
It's a game to me. And I want us to think about the last time we had to do this and how we have learned to do this, and then put that into play with some of the things we've just been talking about. But let me just get right to this, Dan. Right, so
I have no idea what you're talking about.
When's the last time you applied for a job?
It's been a little over a year.
Okay, you're not leaving us.
Okay, good.
I've been offered jobs. I've turned them down.
So how many job interviews, did you do a job interview before it?
Yeah. I'm very good at interviews.
You're very personal.
I'm the best at interviews.
Okay, you're really? Okay, good. How many job interviews do you think you've had?
Like in his whole life?
Yeah. I should clarify, I'm just joking, by the way. I'm mugging for the camera.
Mogging for the camera.
I'm mogging the camera. It's not even a camera here. Oh, I don't know. Probably like 20.
Do you have a favorite question from being interviewed?
I love the what is your weakness question.
Oh, good. Because that's exactly the question I was going to ask you.
He's taking notes.
And I was going to ask you, can you just do me a favor? Dan.
Yeah.
What's your biggest weakness?
Honestly, I think I have a hard time setting boundaries in my life between when I need to be on or off work. I find when I dedicate myself to a project fully, I can kind of lose myself in it. And I take very personally the success of whatever mission's been assigned to me. So I rely on the people around me and especially my superiors to help me stay in line and know when to switch off. Because otherwise, I'm just going to be at it the entire time.
Holy shit, that was corporate gold.
Yeah, dude, I got you. That wasn't even the best I could do. I had to speak this language for so long.
The thing is, that's actually kind of true.
Yeah, well, isn't it better when you tell the truth in stories like that? The advice I always got was take a strength and then state it as a weakness. There you go.
All right. So that was, I tried to clock this. I'm sure someone could slow us down and actually get the data here, but I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You use the pronoun I or mine, I got at least 20, 21, maybe 22 times that I could clock in that. Are you a narcissist? I mean, if
the company needs me to be a narcissist, am I still in an interview?
So okay, now the game's over. Let's pause for 1 second here, right? Okay. That encounter that just happened here, probably happening across the country thousands of times an hour. Actually, probably not now, probably happening less and less, but assuming the jobs numbers are decent, happening all the goddamn time.
Yeah.
And people are answering, I'm going to be willing to say, probably much less well than you just did across the board.
Wasn't even that good.
Well, you weren't trying to sell it, especially.
That's true.
Well, you nailed it, though. And take a step back. The question I might ask here is like, where is the narcissism in this encounter? Or rather, what type of self, in terms of a combination of self-certainty, self-knowledge, agency, but also like grandiosity and vulnerability, is being cultivated here? The spoiler that I kind of want to get to is that if you have read or do read a best-selling book or op-ed or anything that mentions narcissism anytime in the past 20 or 30 years, you have, I guarantee, encountered a claim that people are becoming more narcissistic, that our culture is more narcissistic, and that generally this is a kind of moral blight, which is being symptomatically expressed by the incoming generational cadre, right? Or the people who are supposedly performing this narcissism in all kinds of ways. In pretty much all of those cases, the actual methodology for how narcissism is measured is the amount of times people use the first person pronoun or first person based sentences in things like job applications and college application paperwork.
That's bonkers.
Yeah.
Right? Or it's a slightly mystified version of this, where it's like people are performing selves. They're putting themselves out there in this way that's clearly all about their narcissism. Clearly, that's not the whole story, right? Or rather, narcissism there, if we're going to use narcissism to describe this encounter, right, it's not an individual pathology. It may even not even be a pathology, right? You're speaking a language, Dan, because you need the job. It's something that is related to a performance of self. And we don't see the narcissism as a thing that might be applied properly, like the position of boss, right? Or that rather you have a system of authority and distribution, essentially political power, right? That is demanding other people perform narcissism or a certain type of self as a condition of their receiving anything to begin with. And then later also describing that as pathological narcissistic. In other words, what I hope this kind of little vignette gives us, in addition to being, Dan, you're a rock star for doing a thing, like, is this kind of, if you've ever felt the weirdness of being on the receiving end of that question, like, how do I answer this right? Or like, what actually is happening here? Or if you've just been able to immediately roll with the punches and just deliver that stuff because you understand that's how it's done, you are actually in a kind of like quintessential 21st century scene of narcissism, right? Or scene where the concept of narcissism can both clarify certain types of performances of self, but also check overly hasty moralizing language about selfhood, and may also point to how institutions of power relate to the creation and performance of selfhood.
This has been an episode of Ordinary Unhappiness, a podcast about psychoanalysis, politics, pop culture, and the ways we suffer now. I'm Abby Kluchin, and today I was joined by Patrick Blanchfield and Dan Yowell. This podcast is produced by Dan Yowell. Theme music by Formal Chicken.